Hello and welcome to today's Q&A show for sales and marketing careers in CPG. I'm your host, and founder of 95 Marketability, where we help professionals differentiate as top talent to get the job they love, earn more money, and accelerate their career. I'm delighted to have Laura McLennan on the show today, who is the founder of Fish Recruit and partner who specializes in recruiting for the sales and marketing top talent in CPG. We're going to talk about 4 topics today: sales and marketing career paths in CPG, trends in marketing opportunities, ideal candidate profile, and how to waste yourself. So welcome, Laura.
Hi.
Thanks for being here today. So why don't we start off where you share with us your experience working in CPG and what you do now at Fish Recruit.
Okay. I started in CPG back in 1994. I'm super old. And I started with Colgate-Palmolive. I got the job through a contact. It was somebody that I knew through a part-time job that was a VP of sales who set me up with his niece at Colgate-Palmolive. And I started in part-time merchandising because that was the only way I could get a foot in the door at the time. And so I did the part-time merchandising until the full-time role came about, which took me about 8 months till something full-time came up. And then I took the full-time sales role. I was with Colgate for 2 years in field sales. I then went to Coca-Cola. I was headhunted over to Coca-Cola, so by a recruiter like myself who gave me a call. And just to give you some insight there, what happened is the recruiter at the time called all the Shoppers Drug Mart accounts and said, who is your best sales rep? And somebody gave them my name, and that's how he got a hold of me. So that's often how recruiters find people, just to give you a little insight there. I went over to Coca-Cola. I was a business development manager managing 2 field sales reps there. I moved through, as I went through CPG, I kept noticing other jobs in CPG that I was curious about. I wanted to keep understanding the business more. So I moved into trade marketing because I was curious about the marketing side. From there I moved into customer marketing, and then I was headhunted by Molson and went over to Molson back into sales, doing national account sales for them. Then I moved into brand marketing. Then I moved into being the director of field marketing for Coors Canada, and then Coors and Molson merged, and I was the director of field marketing at Molson. And through all of this, I just found I had done a path through CPG that had me doing every facet of sales and marketing that there was, basically. But I just wasn't excited about it anymore. It wasn't feeling purposeful to me at that time. I was getting more excited about helping younger people make career decisions and giving younger people advice, people that worked for me on their career paths and what they should do to get to where they wanted to go. And I was really enjoying that side of things. And as I was meeting with recruiters, I was realizing that there was probably a gap, certainly in the recruiters that I had met with, of recruiters who had actual experience in the fields that they recruited for. So I started thinking about recruiting, thinking I could add more value because I've been in all the places that I'm recruiting for. I can offer better advice, I think, to candidates. So I found James Campbell, and now we started Fish Recruit together. James's whole career has been in recruitment, so we had his expertise as a recruiter. We had my expertise being in the actual positions, and the two of us started off as a really great team. He brought in the clients, I filled the positions, and we grew from there. And I think there's 10 or 11 of us at Fish Recruit now, and we kept growing and kept meeting more people, and we've been very successful. And I absolutely love what I do now. Now I feel fulfilled, and I am still working in the area that I've had my expertise. So I feel fulfilled that way, and I'm helping people find jobs in CPG. So.
Great. Well, thank you so much. It's such a great experience. I see a lot of on the poll right now who are hearing a double echo in my voice. I apologize, everyone. Probably my voice is just to Laura's room. But if you can hear Laura clearly, that's fine. I'm asking questions here. So Laura, what is the typical sales and marketing career path in CPG? How many years of experience is required for each level?
There are 2 different paths. So you can go in CPG, there's different types of marketing as well. So there's brand marketers, which are traditionally, they're really business owners. And I think consumer packaged goods is the only real industry in Canada where there is a true brand role that is a business manager. So if you're a brand manager, a lot of people think brand managers are marketers, and they are, but they're business owners, they're business people. They are the hub within CPG, they run the businesses by brand. But there's also trade marketing, and then there's customer marketing, and there's field marketing, and there's all kinds of different marketing roles within CPG. So, I'll break each one down, but brand, specifically brand marketing, if that's the career path that you want, you start off as an ABM, which is an assistant brand manager. Some companies like Kraft have brand assistants first. So you'd spend a couple of years at a company like Kraft, you'd spend a couple of years as a brand assistant. You would then move into an assistant brand manager. You would spend anywhere from 2 to 3 years as an assistant brand manager in a company like Kraft. If it's a company that only had the first level as assistant brand manager, you would at least spend 3 years at the ABM level, and then hopefully you get promoted up to the brand manager level. Brand manager level, you spend anywhere from 2 to 5 years as a brand manager, sometimes more. And then you get moved up to the senior brand manager level. Senior brand managers are the ones who actually will manage people. Sometimes brand managers do. The senior brand manager level, you should probably be getting to that level after 5 years of being a brand manager. If you're going on to 6, 7, 8 years at the brand manager level, then your career is starting to stall. So usually brand managers are very ambitious people. And so there is kind of a trajectory that you should be on if you're doing well in brand. So let's say after 5 years of being a brand manager, you're a senior brand manager, you spend anywhere from 2 to 4 years as a senior brand manager, and then you move up to the director level. Again, if you're stalled at the senior brand manager level and not getting to that director level, you should start making some other career choices, because you'll eventually fall off the map. So brand specifically, because they're business managers and you need a BCom or an MBA to get those jobs these days, they are filled with very, very ambitious people, very smart people who like to move up and through, and companies tend to not hold on to brand managers who aren't moving through the system. They tend to like to move them into other areas of the business so that new, younger people can come in and fill those roles and keep the system moving, if that makes sense. Very few people will make it to a VP of brand. But that's the traditional path for brand managers, and it's pretty solid trajectory. On the sales side, sales nowadays, you want cross-functional experience. So it used to be pure sales. You'd move from field sales to key accounts to national accounts to team lead to director. Now they like you to move cross-functionally. So now as you'd start in field sales or as an analyst, from there you would move into either key accounts or a category management job. Key accounts, for example, field sales, you'll call on store level in the field. So you would call on store-level Shoppers Drug Mart accounts or store-level Walmart accounts, and you've got a more senior salesperson feeding strategic information down to you, and you're going to store level to make sure everything's being executed well. Once you're good at that, you move to a key account level where you learn to manage a head office account, and those could be accounts like Highland Farms or Colin Frisch or some of the smaller distributors. And you work with them, and that's where you learn to negotiate deals. That's where you learn to negotiate flyer deals and how to manage your trade spend, etc. And once you get really good at that, then they move you into national accounts. You might be managing one category or one brand within a Loblaws, greater Loblaws team, or a greater Walmart team, or you work on a Sobeys or Metro. You move up through the ranks. As you start doing well, you need at least 2 years at each level. And then you move up the ranks into bigger and bigger businesses, and bigger businesses meaning the dollar size of your business usually. And the reason you need 2 years at each level is because you need to make a plan, you need to live the plan and learn from it, and then make another plan based on those learnings. If you make a plan and move on to the next level, you're not really learning what you did right and what you did wrong and what you would change the next time. So most companies have you at a certain level for at least 2 years so that you can cycle your plan, as they like to call it, which is really important in your career progression. So some people want to say, but I did a plan, I know how to do it, I need to get to the next level. You need to respect the fact that you need to live the results of your plan. Through that sales path up to team lead, and then director of sales or a director of a customer, you'll likely make a lot of cross-functional moves over to trade marketing, shopper marketing, category management, which is the analytics side. Nowadays, to get to a director of sales role, you need to have moved cross-functionally. So that could take up to 10 years sometimes to get all that cross-functional experience that's required to be a really good director. And I would say, so you've got your marketing path and your sales path. Within that, category management and trade marketing, again, they all fall on the sales side. Those are cross-functional moves nowadays. So you'll rarely find a director of category management either who has not spent time on the sales side. So those are all part and parcel with each other.
Great. So, Laura, what's the difference between category manager versus marketing manager versus a brand manager in terms of roles and responsibilities?
So if you think of brand, and I wish I could show a diagram here, if you think of brand as the hub of your wheel, the brand manager is like a mini business. So let's say it's the brand manager on Colgate toothpaste. So they own that brand, everything to do with that brand. They own the P&L on that brand. They own the brand strategy as it relates to sales and everything, product production, where it's produced, logistics, how it's shipped, how it gets from the point of production through to the customer shelves. They own all of that. That all falls into your P&L. So if brand is the hub, everything else offshoots from brand. So the sales team offshoots from brand. Trade marketing, these days, trade marketing is about helping to manage the trade spend. So you fall somewhere between sales and brand. You help the brand person understand what the salesperson's going through, and the salesperson understand what the brand manager wants to see happen at the customer level. So if the salesperson wants to put Colgate toothpaste on for 25 cents, the brand manager would say, no, you're eroding my brand, you can't do that, you're ruining the brand positioning. So the trade marketing is the person who stands in the middle of those and is the sort of mediator of sorts. And they also help manage the spend so that things don't, the salesperson doesn't overspend on trade spend, so that there's not too much money being spent with the customer that erodes profits for the company. So that's what a trade marketing manager does. Nowadays, there's a shopper marketing manager, and often people confuse trade marketing with shopper marketing. Shopper marketing is a newer concept that's come in probably the last 5 to 6 years, but really taking, Procter & Gamble's been doing it for years, for example, so is Kraft and the big tier 1 companies. But most companies have only really adopted it well over the last 3 to 4 years. And what a shopper marketing person and a shopper insights person does is they look at what drives its path to purchase. So what drives your decision to even go to a particular store when you need toothpaste? So if you need Colgate toothpaste, are you going to go to Walmart to pick it up? Are you going to go to Shoppers Drug Mart to pick it up? Are you going to pick it up with your groceries? Are you going to pick it up at the corner store? And why are you deciding to pick up a product at any one of those, not just retailers, but any one of those channels, I guess. So a shopper will make a very different decision. If they're picking up toothpaste at the corner store, it's usually for convenience sake. So maybe that corner store can charge more for the toothpaste there. If they're picking it up when they're getting their groceries, they'll only pick it up at a grocery store if it's on deal, that type of thing. So that's what a shopper marketing and a shopper insights person does, is they try and affect that path to purchase, either through marketing programs, through online marketing programs, through couponing, through in-store incentives sometimes. But what they want to do is understand who the consumer is, what the consumer's thought process is when they're buying that product on the way to the store and once they get into the store, and then trying to capture their attention on the path and in the store. That's what a shopper marketing manager does. Category manager looks at all the data. So category manager looks at the sales data, what we call syndicated data. And they look at what's been happening, what the trends are, what the competitive products are doing, what competitive categories are doing, and they really get into the nuts and bolts of what's happening at store level, what's happening when a consumer picks up a product and puts it in their basket, what else is in their basket, and why did they pick up the product there, and again, sort of working with the shopper marketing manager, but how do you affect that purchase with all the data that you're seeing? Why did they pick up your product, Colgate versus Crest, let's say? And they learn that from the data that they get back, the sales data that they get back from the stores. And also using Nielsen data, which gives you share data across all different accounts. So category managers used to be real number crunchers who would sit at their desk and analyze a lot, and then feed the results to the salesperson. The salesperson would turn it into a magical story, come up with a strategy, and sell it to the customer. Nowadays, the category manager is often going to the customer with the salesperson because what they do is quite complex now. So when they, because they're now what we call customer facing, category managers tend to also have a real sales personality, or they require a real sales personality now. So this is where everything's sort of blending together, as I was saying, with that cross-functional. Everybody needs to be cross-functionally trained now. So, and then shopper insights managers are people who use both the Nielsen data, the syndicated data, as well as consumer data, which is what a brand manager uses. They put all that data together and come up with even deeper insights into what motivates a consumer. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Kind of.
Now, I've heard of
a chalkboard and a diagram.
the difference between, I guess I've heard a category manager can also be a buyer as well, or is that just a difference?
Yes, that's a good point. Good for raising that. A category manager on the retailer side, what they call category management, is actually a buyer. So a category manager on the vendor side, which is your CPG company, a manufacturer, is very different from what a category manager is on the retail side, which is a buyer. So the buyer, again, uses all that data and makes decisions on what should be happening in their category in the store.
Okay, great. That's great. And so, everyone who's on live here, feel free to ask questions. I'll ask Laura. Laura, people typically get the difference between Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 CPG firms. How do you define them? And what's considered Tier 1 versus Tier 2, Tier 3?
Okay. This is one that it's quite funny, actually, because it just gets thrown around a lot. I work for a Tier 1 company because Tier 1 to people just means really great. Most people just think Tier 1 is, I work for an awesome company. And I'm sure they do. But when it comes to actually defining what a Tier 1 company is, Tier 1, when I worked for Colgate-Palmolive at the beginning of my career, I remember we launched Total Toothpaste back then, and I remember sitting in the big meeting when they were launching the product, and they said they were hoping that this product would turn them into a Tier 1 CPG company. So I'm sure most people would think of Colgate-Palmolive as a Tier 1 company because they're big, well-known brands. But they actually function in a few categories. They're number 1 in a lot of their categories, but they're not the total size of the company to warrant having that Tier 1 label like a Procter & Gamble is. So to give you an example of typical Tier 1 companies, Procter & Gamble, the massive, Unilever, Johnson & Johnson, Nestle, Pepsi, those are all Kraft, of course, those are all Tier 1 CPG companies. Tier 2 CPG companies doesn't mean that the brands are any less. It doesn't mean that they're not number 1 in their categories. It's just from a total dollar size, they're not as big as the Tier 1 company. So you might look at a Campbell's, let's say, who is number 1 in the by far number 1 in their category. Fabulous brands, fabulous company, but they're actually quite small in compared to a Unilever, let's say. And then when you start getting into more of the Tier 3 companies, again, it's just you go further down the notch on the dollar size of that company. And sometimes a Tier 1 company in the US is actually not a Tier 1 company in Canada. So for an example of that, Hershey's, who's by far number 1 in the US in terms of confection, isn't number 1 in Canada, although they're climbing up there quickly. Isn't or wasn't number 1 in Canada, so they weren't the Tier 1 chocolate company in Canada, but they certainly were in the U.S. So just to give you an example, some companies are Tier 1 globally, but not in a certain country. Okay.
Is it more competitive for Tier 1 versus like a Tier 2 company?
Absolutely. So Tier 1 companies are the toughest ones to break into. If you just graduated with your MBA or your BCom, obviously you want to aim for a Tier 1 company. And the best thing about working for a Tier 1 company is you are surrounded by the best of the best. So it's you're learning structure. You're learning. The company's so big that there could be 4 people working on as brand managers on one brand because there's that much work to be done. But you're surrounded by the best of the best. You're learning you're learning structures of companies, how all the different pieces of a company works, because each of those pieces is divided into different functions. So from a learning standpoint, it's an ideal place to be. But as you progress through your career, sometimes Tier 1 isn't the best place to be, because it's really tough to get noticed in a Tier 1 company to progress. Again, they're full of the best, and the cream rises to the top, and sometimes the squeakiest wheel will get heard. And if you're not a real type A personality, sometimes you can get lost in a Tier 1 organization. So sometimes then a Tier 2 organization that's not quite as large, that's easier to get noticed for the work that you do without having to be too competitive or too demanding, I guess. Sometimes that suits your personality better. And some people will find I've started off in a Tier 1, but I moved to a Tier 2 where I felt more at home in the culture. It felt more collaborative. It felt that I could progress in my career without having to break my back just trying to get noticed.
Great. So let's move into the trends and opportunities, and then we'll answer some questions from the audience here. What are some trends right now in CPG, and what type of talent is in demand?
Some of the trends that have emerged in CPG over the last 5 years, probably, as I said, shopper marketing and shopper insights was a new concept, and it's strictly because there's been more data to work with. We have more data than we've ever had before as online has grown. We know more and more about consumers and who's shopping in what store and who's buying your brand and what other brands they're buying when they're buying your brand. So shopper marketing is something that's emerged. For the longest time, people thought it was trade marketing, and trade marketing, as I said, was, you're more, at that time, back then, it was like customer marketing. What promotion are you putting on in store? So often you'll hear those two terms confused. But shopper marketing is really a science, the science of path to purchase and knowing more about the consumer and understanding both syndicated data and consumer data. So that's a new trend, new-ish. And to be a solid shopper marketing manager or a shopper insights person, you need experience on both the brand side and the sales side to be really good at that. And if you're starting your career and you have an opportunity to be an associate shopper marketing manager, let's say, some people will turn their nose up at that because it's not a brand manager. I want to be an assistant brand manager. Well, shopper marketing is growing like crazy. So if you're offered an associate shopper marketing manager position, take it. It's the fastest growing segment in CPG in terms of marketing, and it's extremely valuable. And I say that because I'll back up a bit, sorry about this, but as the U.S., again, as the U.S. and some of the larger companies has taken ownership of a lot of the brands, so anything that's done from a mass communication standpoint is often owned out of the U.S. Sometimes the P&L is run out of the U.S., and they've left brand managers in Canada with less to do these days than what they used to be able to get their hands into. So television advertising, let's say. Procter & Gamble, if you work for Procter & Gamble, you used to be able to do television advertising, but you don't get to do that in Canada anymore, which is a real drag because it's fun. So now they're getting more and more scientific about the shopper and what happens at store level. So really, shopper brand managers at Procter & Gamble are excellent shopper insights people and excellent shopper marketing managers, which makes them in demand for other companies. So as I said, a lot of companies are steering towards that shopper manager, shopper insights person, shopper marketing manager. That's a real trend happening in Canada, and it's an important one. The other one is digital marketing managers, which is no surprise to anybody. But what's happened in the past with CPG has been, they were a bit late to the game in terms of really, at least, and again, in Canada, I'm not speaking for the U.S., a bit late to the game in terms of what they were doing with digital marketing and social media, and they were relying on their agencies. So as a brand manager, I'd rely on my digital marketing agency to tell me what I need to do with my digital plan, and they would tell me what to do, and I would do it. And then it got to the point where a lot of these digital agencies were telling companies to do, you got to do this because it's the coolest thing that's out there. It's so awesome. And the brand managers would say, okay, we have to do this. We have to invest in this. And then they were sitting back going, wait a second. I'm certainly building the equity for my brand, but I don't know if that's translating into sales for me in Canada. And an example of that would be a company that's done a really great viral video for a brand. And let's say the Canadian marketing team invested in that. And the video goes viral all over the world. And what it actually, so they spent their money on this, but what it actually delivered in sales in Canada for them was very little. So was that a smart use of their marketing dollars or not? And these are the types of questions that brand people started to ask is, I think it's really cool and it's really great, but should it be coming from my budget? So what they started doing then was hiring digital people internally. And they didn't want to invest in a lot of money in having an internal digital person because they didn't know how much work they'd have to do. So they could hire an associate or an assistant digital marketing manager. And they'd want one from another CPG company. But the problem was all the different CPG companies were in the same position. Nobody had an internal digital person yet. So that trend has really only happened over the last few years, with the exception of, say, a Kraft, who's has a fantastic social around their What's Cooking campaign. They started early days in that area. But then they started hiring internal digital people. So now you've got an internal digital person working between the brand person and the brand or the digital marketing agency, and they're like a translator. So they would push back on the digital agency and they'd say, no, I speak your language, and what you're saying actually isn't what we need, because I also speak the brand person's language, and I think what we need to do is X, and I think we only need to spend X on that. And then everybody started going, so now they started hiring more digital people and realizing they should be managing their digital strategies internally. So that's something that's just happening now. And we have a terrible time finding solid, professional digital people that want to be client side, because sometimes it's not as fun as the agency side. You don't get to be as creative. But it's something that's really necessary. And you also need a university degree to work for a lot of CPG companies, and a lot of the digital people that work agency side have come through the college route and are fantastic, wonderful, creative digital people, but the CPG companies won't hire them because they don't have a university degree. So it's a bit of a pickle when it comes to recruiting these days. So if you're looking for a foot in the door into a CPG marketing job, going the digital route is a really smart route to go these days. So those are the two biggest trends, I would say.
Yeah, that's great to hear that. I have a question here. What do you recommend for someone who's making an industry transition to CPG? What are the key factors in finding an ideal candidate?
Could you say that again?
If someone's making an industry transition,
okay.
What do you look for in an ideal candidate?
Okay, so if somebody's working in, say, the telco industry and wants to work within CPG, what do I look for? Mm-hmm. Hopefully you haven't spent...
Oh, looks like we lost Laura. Laura, are you still there? This is what happens with technology. I hope that how we got frozen here. Laura, are you still there? I can see myself, but I can't hear Laura.
Are we okay?
There you go. We're back. You were frozen.
Okay.
Okay, yep.
Okay.
All right, start.
One of the things as a recruiter that I want to get across to anybody who's entering their career, choose your industry wisely, because you will likely have to stay within that industry for most of your career. So again, if you've gone too far down one industry road, moving into CPG is extremely difficult. And it's not because you can't do it. It's not because anyone's looking at you saying you can't work in CPG, you're just not smart enough. It's not like that at all. It's just that nobody wants to train you. There's a path, there's a step that goes within CPG, both in the marketing and the sales side, and it's a path that each step you take, you learn a little more and you learn a little more. So nobody's going to let you enter CPG at a high level from another industry, unless it's a small CPG company. So in terms of what do I look for if somebody's going from one industry into the CPG industry, I'm looking for somebody who's probably only 2 or 3 years into their career and who's willing to make a move and start at the beginning on the CPG side. If they are further along in their career, let's say a sales role, as long as they've called on like customers, so if they've been calling on Future Shop and Best Buy and Walmart, let's say, then great. If you called on Walmart, we can probably get you over onto the CPG side, but again, you're probably going to have to take a few steps down. And it's a bit unfair. It's very unfair, actually. but it's just a fact of the industry. So they like their own. They like CPG companies, like people who've grown up through CPG.
Yeah, I think that it's still certainly possible. I had a client who went from telecommunications and working right now, but he took on a contract role, which was probably easy.
Yeah, and you know what?
Oh no, Laura's screen is frozen again. What's wrong with technology today? Oh, what's wrong with Google Plus? Oh, I apologize, everyone. This should not be happening, but it's out of my control here. Laura? Oh, this is so weird. That got frozen. Connection.
Okay.
You're back again?
Okay. You're back again? Yep.
Must be an internet. Oh well. Out of our control. All right, Laura.
Okay. Do you want to? It's an important topic, and I'm sure one that people who are watching are particularly interested in, is making that transition over. And I've just sounded quite negative in what I've said. I think there's a few things I should couch there. Is that making the transition through a recruiter is probably not your best bet. And the only reason being is that when companies hire us, they want us to find the best in the market for what they've asked for. So we have to be as literal as possible in delivering what they've asked for, because that's what they pay us to do. So making the transition on your own, let's say you work with somebody at Rogers and they know you're awesome, and now they're over at Johnson & Johnson and they're looking internally for somebody. You can make that transition a lot easier through somebody who's worked with you before and knows your work habits and knows how smart you are and how great you are at your job. That's a very effective way to make that transition into another industry. It's only through a recruiter that it's particularly difficult. Hopefully that's a little less defeatist sounding. So it certainly can be done. It's just the route you choose to do it it's a direct route will be more effective.
Great. Laura, I have a question from a participant here. If you move from the selling and distribution of IT products to retail as an analyst in CPG, how do you get into such an environment?
I need you to ask that again. Is that written down? Can I look at that somewhere?
Yeah, from Arvin.
Oh, I see. If you move from selling and distribution of IT products to retail, to an analyst role in CPG, how do you get an entry back into such an environment? Back into, I'm not sure what you mean, is it back into the CPG environment? Or back into the selling environment, I'm guessing? I'm going to answer this as I think it is. So if somebody's gone from selling IT products into retail, and because they've had to take a step back in order to get into CPG, which is pretty typical, they've taken an analyst role within CPG, which is the right thing to do, and that's fantastic. How do you get back into a sales role? You just have to work your way through the system. So you're going to spend at least 2 years as an analyst so that you understand the CPG world. And my biggest thing that I always tell people is tell people what you want. So don't stay in that analyst role hoping that somebody's going to notice that you're doing an awesome job. Point out to people that you're doing an awesome job, and ask people, I want to get there, so how do I get there? Ask people who are in those jobs. Ask the person that you're working for. I only want to be an analyst for a couple of years. I get it. What I want to do is be a key account manager, so help me understand how I can get that key account manager role. So the best thing is to do that within your company. Where you probably won't be successful is being an analyst who wants to be a salesperson and trying to change companies to be that salesperson. Try and do it within the company you're in. Hopefully that answers your question.
And then Lee had a question. Are retailers representatives?
I'm just trying to find that question. Hang on.
Bit on the bottom. From Lee.
Are retailers receptive to CPG representatives? Absolutely. Yeah, that's how the business runs. So retailers at a head office level, if you're a category manager, as we discussed, or a buyer at the retailer, your day is filled with CPG or any kind of packaged goods salesperson coming in and telling you about your category, why you need their products, why you need to move their products from the third shelf up to the fourth shelf, and providing you with the data that you require to make a smart decision of where you're going to put that product on your shelf and at what price point and at what promotion. So they're absolutely receptive to CPG. That's how it works.
Great. So moving on, I guess, in terms of as we talked about the ideal candidate profile, what's the difference between working with corporate recruiters versus agency recruiters?
I'd have to be careful on this one. Corporate recruiters, usually the larger companies, have very robust corporate recruitment teams. So Johnson & Johnson, Kraft, etc., have large recruitment teams. Often those people are HR people, so often they're HR trained and they know how to interview and assess people very well. But because they get inundated with resumes through their system of people applying online, it's common for them to miss great people in that pile of resumes. Again, they'll be very literal in how they're hiring. So if they're told to hire a salesperson with 2 years of CPG sales experience, they'll go through 400 resumes looking for somebody who had that exact experience. Whereas if you're working with an agency recruiter, sometimes we're having a verbal conversation with that recruiter on the corporate side. So that recruiter on the corporate side may say to us, no, we're looking for somebody with 2 years CPG sales experience. I can say to them, yeah, the person doesn't have 2 years CPG sales experience, but they have been an analyst for 2 years, and they have been working with actual key account managers, and I can sell you. So the difference is corporate recruiters tend to be HR trained and trained in recruitment, which is interviewing skills, etc. Agency recruiters tend to be salespeople. So I would consider us closer to being a salesperson than an HR person. So my job is to help my clients find people in the market, and my job is to find those people in the market and sell them on the opportunity that my client has. So I'm going to find somebody who's awesome in the market and happy in their job and say, no, you want to come over here and work for Smucker Foods in this analyst job because they're a fabulous company and they have a great culture, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm a salesperson.
What are the red flags or absolute no-nos for people when they're working with recruiters?
Could you say that again? Sorry?
Yeah, red flag for absolutely not to do when working with a recruiter.
A red flag?
Or what not to do.
Of what not to do when working with a recruiter? Oh. Here's the thing. I know one of the questions coming up could be how do you, and I'll combine the two, is how do you choose a recruiter to work for? And I always tell people, you don't choose a recruiter to work with. You work with every recruiter out there, and there will be recruiters that you can't stand, and there'll be recruiters that you love. At the end of the day, we're representing companies, so even if it's a recruiter that you do not like, they may have the job that you really want, and if they don't have the job you really want now, they may have it down the road. So just be respectful. Whether you like the person or don't like the person, respect them, don't respect them. At the end of the day, they might be the middle person to the job that you need at the end of the road. So just be very, very respectful. So a red flag for me is when people are not respectful, obviously. When people assume that I don't have industry knowledge, people sometimes assume that I've always been a recruiter and work across all different agencies. So again, when you're looking up a recruiter, look them up on LinkedIn and look at their background. And I love that when somebody's actually looked at my background and calls me up and says, I saw your career, and I'm actually, they'll make note of, my uncle worked at Coca-Cola as well, and I'll say, oh, great, and it starts a conversation. So do that. Be expecting too much or lying about your salary. Understand that recruiters, we live and work in this world. We kind of can guess pretty close to what you're making based on the company you're with, the level that you're at, how many years. I can guess pretty closely to what you're making. So when you come to me when I say, what are you making, and you're pumping up a salary of 20,000. I know you're pumping up a salary of 20,000. I won't say that to you, but I do know. And at that point, I put you down as somebody who's maybe not very honest or maybe not very self-aware, and I'm not really anxious to be introducing you to my clients at that point. So you need to be self-aware. You need to be honest with recruiters. Yeah, I'm trying to think what other red flags might come up, but
yeah, I'll jump in. A few
Yeah.
things I'm seeing sometimes lately when people are not honest, they on their LinkedIn profile they're still working at the company, but then when I talk to them, they're no longer with the company.
Yes.
Yeah.
You don't win. Do not lie. Do not lie on your resume. Do not exaggerate. It will catch up with you, and as soon as you're pegged as somebody who's done that, a note goes in the system. So, yeah, I talked to that guy, didn't feel he was very honest, said he did this, and he actually did that. And we know, and it's in our system. So all the other recruiters in our company also know that about you. You will never win by lying or exaggerating, so don't do it. It gets you nowhere. Might get you somewhere in the short term, but it'll bite you up in the butt later on. So,
I
yeah.
absolutely agree. Yes. I have a question here from Mike. I'm hearing mixed things on submitting cover letters when applying for a job. What is your take?
Hang on, let me find that.
The first one.
Oh, it's the first one? Sorry. I'm hearing mixed things on submitting cover letters when applying for jobs. What's your take? My personal take, and I can only share my personal take because every recruiter likes different things, I do not like cover letters. I find these days that there's so much communicating going on in so many different ways that we all have less time to read anything. So what I want to know should be in your resume, and we'll talk about what should be in your resume and how your resume should read, but cover letters to me, I never get around to reading them. It's usually a lot of rhetoric. It's usually a lot of, if you tell me in your cover letter that you're a very smart person who's a self-starter, the first thing I'm going to do is prove it to me. So I'm going to look in your resume to see what the proof is on paper that you're a self-starter and that you're very smart. And then I'm also going to ask you to prove that in an interview. So your resume, to me, your resume is your packaging. I don't need a cover letter. And none of my clients look for cover letters either. So your cover letter is your email. So if somebody's referred you in, you would put in the body of your email that my Uncle Jim knows your brother and said I'd be wonderful working for your company. So me personally, I don't like cover letters.
Yeah, I don't really read them. Probably like a hot message at the end that will help with the decision and the rest. Yeah. What are what makes like a
I'm sorry, I need to ask that again.
What makes a great resume?
Oh, a great resume. Great topic. Again, this is the place where do not exaggerate, do not add anything fluffy in there, keep it very, very concise. Your resume is your packaging. So I don't want you to tell me that you're smart and a self-starter and confident and ambitious. I want you to show me that through what you've achieved, and what you've achieved should be in your resume, and it should only be what you've achieved. So the biggest mistake that people make, and I know, Diana, you agree, is that they put their job description down. So it says, I'm a territory manager, and then underneath it has 7 bullet points about what they're responsible for. I want to know what you've accomplished. So you might have what I prefer, and you can go on our website and find examples, or if anybody wants to email me, I'll send you my preferred template. But is put the job down, the amount of years you've been at the job. In 1 or 2 sentences right underneath is where you want to put any specifics of what you're responsible for that isn't obvious from your title. So if you're a sales rep, I want to know what clients or what customers you've called on. Did you have any direct reports, or what your territory was? Beyond that, I want to know key accomplishments. So I want to know in a very concise way, what did you accomplish in terms of, if it's quantifiable, quantify it. I increased sales from X to X with X customer. The next one, I changed the formatting of our reporting structure to make it more efficient. Next bullet, anything that's an actual accomplishment that you can hang your hat on. And if there's only 3 major things that you've accomplished, that's fine. Don't make things up. Don't fill it in. What I want is a teaser so that when I interview you, I say, you increased sales from X to X. Tell me how you did that. And then in your interview, you'll expand on that. So again, you don't need to expand on it on your resume either. What I typically tell people is if you've written something down in your resume, ask yourself, so what? So think of the person who's reading it and say, so what? Why am I telling this person this? Is it because it's my own ego and I want them to know because I feel fabulous about it? Or is it something that they're actually going to be interested in and it's going to help me get the job that I want? If it's the second, then put it in. If it's the first, don't bother. One thing that I will say as an exception, though, I do really like when people put personal interest at the bottom because I do want to know about you. I don't just want to know your accomplishments. I do want to know at the bottom that you were an Iron Man, or that you love to read, or that you're a photographer, or that you play the guitar, because that gives me a place to start building rapport with you in an interview. So if I read, you know, I ran the New York Marathon, and I go, oh, cool, tell me about that as when I'm interviewing you, and then I can get to know you a bit and get to know your passions. So that piece actually is quite important to me. But other than that, stick to your accomplishments. If you don't have a lot of work experience, try and fit everything in one page. Again, put yourself in the reader's shoes. I want to know the companies you worked for, how long you worked for them, what your job was and what you accomplished within that job, what your education was. If you only have you know, a couple of years of experience and work experience, put your education right at the top. If you've been working for 5 years or more, your education goes at the bottom because your work experience is more relevant.
Great. I really agree. The accomplishment is all about value creation that generates curiosity.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's your teaser, right? It's the packaging. I want to know. I don't want to know if I always say there's deodorants on a shelf, and if every deodorant says I stop sweat, then how do you know which one to choose? So what I want to know is I stop sweat and I smell like blue flowers. So then I might pick up that deodorant and say, it builds curiosity. So from your resume to stand out against the other resume next to yours, I want to know what you did and what was specific to you, not what your job was or somebody at your level does.
Yeah. So one last question on resume before we do interviews by Arvind. How many years of work experience should you show on your resume?
I like seeing it all. I'm not in agreement with a lot of the outplacement services these days say just put your last 10 years in. In fact, I had somebody take their education off because they thought it was too long ago, which I was like, what? Your education always has to be on. And I like to see it all. Maybe only expand on the last 10 years, but at least put your companies and titles of the jobs prior to that. I don't want to see a 5-page resume. But I do want to know that you've been working since 1990 because that's relevant to me. If your resume looks like you started working in 2000 and then we meet and you're 52, then I find that weird. I want to know, what did you do in between all those years? It's relevant. It's your career. It should be in your resume. You just don't have to say if it's more than 12 years. Let's say I don't need to know the details of what you did back then.
Great. So moving into interviews, from Nicole, what tips do you have for succeeding in the CPG interview process?
What are the what that you have to have?
Tips you have for succeeding
in an interview process. Okay. CPG interviews tend to be behavioral type interviews. So the best thing you can do, and the other thing is CPG it's a corporate environment, so you need to be uber professional. So you still have to be yourself, but lean on the conservative side. So these days people tend to, because the business environment is more casual, we get a lot of younger people who show up for interviews and they're dressed more casually or they're dressed in slacks and a decent shirt. CPG is still very much a corporate environment. Err on the conservative side, both in what you wear, how you present yourself, and in how you behave within that interview. So be corporate, show your personality, but be conservative. And then within that, do your homework on the company. So you need to know about the company that you're interviewing for, about the people, because you have access to that now through LinkedIn. If you know who you're interviewing with, do your background on your homework on them. Know why you want the job and show that you actually understand the job. But know why you want that specific job, and know without a doubt why you think you will be the best person for them to hire for that job. Don't be wishy-washy about it. You should have that goal and know, if you look at the competencies which should be on the job description that you're applying for, make sure that all the examples that you use for the questions that they ask are related to those competencies. So competencies like thought leadership. Make sure that no matter what question you're asked, that you're demonstrating within that interview at some point how you are a thought leader, or how you've been a thought leader in your past, so that they can tick that mark off on the competencies. Go online and look up behavioral questions. Go through the competencies on the job description and look up behavioral questions that match up with the competencies that they're looking for, and practice answering those behavioral questions. And at all times, answer in detail. So people often will skim over, or they'll talk about what one does in a certain situation. So they'll say, have you ever managed a difficult person before? Yes, well, when you're managing difficult people, what you should do is XXX. I don't want to know what you should do or what other people do. I want to know what you did when you managed a difficult person. What was the difficulty with that person? Who were they? What was their job? What was the difficulty? How did you feel about it? What did you think? How did you approach? How did you think how you're going to approach this person? I want to know it all. I want to know what's going on in your head, because that'll help me decide how you'll behave if you're in that situation with my company. So you need to put detail into your answer. That's usually the biggest miss that people make, if they talk in terms of what one does. And in that case, you could have read a book. I don't know whether you're capable of doing it or not. So I want to know that you're capable of doing it because you've done it in your past. So be very detailed in your answer. Situation, action, result. And sometimes if the result was negative, you can say that and what you learned from it and how valuable that was, that the result was not a good one. And you can look back and laugh now because you'll never do that again. And instead you'll do it this way. Sometimes those bad answers, the answers of things that went poorly, are more telling than when things go well. And the other thing is, be self-aware. So when you are asked for what your strengths and weaknesses are, don't be wishy-washy about that. Know what your strengths and weaknesses are. And weaknesses, to me, think of something that you're not good at, you will never be good at it, you don't care because you'll never take a job where that thing is important. And you can share that. Or there's other things that you're not good at, but you know you have to manage. So how do you manage that? If you're not an organized person, you can say, organization is not my strong suit. I recognize that very early on in my career. So this is what I do to make sure that I'm organized at all times. I make a list at 8 o'clock every morning. I hate it, but I do it. And when at the end of the day, I do not leave that office until everything on my list is checked off. And that way you're sharing what a weakness is, but you're also sharing how you manage that. And now I know that you're self-aware, I know that you're honest, and I want to hire somebody like that because that's a real person to me. I've had more than I can count the number of people that sit in front of me saying, when I say, what are you not great at? And they go, I don't know. And I'm thinking, and I egg them on, there's got to be something that you're not, that you don't love to do. What sucks the energy out of you? What do you hate to do? I don't know. I'm just kind of good at everything. There's nothing worse. Know yourself and be honest about it without raising any flags. So.
I agree. I echo this advice that Laura has to say here. Know yourself. Get clear on who you are and what you have to offer.
Yeah, we all have weaknesses, but we have to manage them. So how do you manage them?
Exactly.
It's more telling on how you manage those weaknesses than pretending you don't have any.
Yeah. So Laura, a question here from Anu. Scope for a direct to transition.
That's interesting. I guess it would depend on who you've been doing direct marketing for, what types of companies, and you have to find a position in CPG that is looking for a direct marketer, which don't often happen. In your case, you might want to go agency side, with an agency that works with CPG companies, and try and broaden your experience to being more than direct marketing through that agency while building relationships on the CPG side. You can always go, one of the things we didn't talk about is when you can't get into CPG, you're trying, and you can't get in, go work for a company that serves the CPG industry so that you can work with CPG people and they can get to know you and get to know how awesome you are, and then they'll hopefully bring you in when they're looking for somebody in the future. So not a lot of CPG direct marketing roles, but they certainly hire agencies when they're ready to do a direct marketing program. And if you work for that agency and they love you, then hopefully you can crack in the door that way.
Excellent. Great advice. So Laura, just to wrap things up, is there anything you want to share about fish recruit, where the type of companies or roles that that fish recruit serve?
Sorry, what companies we serve?
Yeah, or type of roles that we recruit for.
Yeah, we started off, as I said, as a CPG recruitment firm. We now have 3 people that work in retail, so we do a lot of retail recruitment. We have 3 to 4 people that work in CPG, sales, marketing, category management, everything to do with CPG. We have somebody who works in agencies, so works with all of the ad agencies, from anything from creative directors to account supervisors. Diana does our business-to-business work for us, so whether that's sales or marketing on B2B. Diana takes care of that for us. And we're actually looking for somebody who can do finance or HR recruitment. So if anyone out there wants to be a finance or HR recruitment, give us a call.
Thank you, Laura. And if anyone wants to find more information, check out fishrecruit.com. Just one question here, Joey. I'll let you read that.
Yeah, I'm told some CPG companies really value math in every one of their individuals, but I'm not strong in math. Should I still share that as my weakness? Good question. There's lots of jobs where you don't have to be the analyst, and I wouldn't define it as math. It's analytics, which is the equivalent of math in the CPG world. So if analytics isn't your strong suit, you can be in a pure sales role where somebody's doing the analytics for you, or you can be in a marketing communications role, again, where somebody else is doing the analytics for you. So there's different areas. If analytics isn't your strong suit, I would express it as it's not an area that I've had enough experience in, and what I'm hoping for is that in my next role, whoever I work for will give me an opportunity to work on those skills and help me improve in that area, and express it that way. So usually, even if you're not great at math, you can get there in analytics if you've got the right teacher or the right coach.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Laura, for your valuable time, wisdom, and insights. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure a lot of them said thank you as well. So we will be sharing this recording, and we'll have some blog posts as well in case people had any issues. So until next time, cheers to your marketability, and we'll see you next month. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. See you later.